Hi, I'm Beth Bonness, host of the Thought Echoes podcast, where we explore how we engage with our thoughts and appreciate their ripple effects and entanglements with those we love and interact with the most. In this episode, I have an animated conversation with psychologist Josh Davis and executive coach Greg Prosmushkin on assuming good intentions as a way to help us improve trust, even in tense relationships, using principles found in NLP, Neurolinguistic Programming. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, Greg and Josh. It's so nice to get a chance to meet you. And if you could tell people a little bit about why you wrote The Difference That Makes the Difference.
Hey, first of all, Beth, thank you so much for having us on. My name is Greg, and I am so proud about the book Josh and I wrote. To answer your question, why do we write the book? Josh is a really smart dude. He is a neuroscientist, he is a PhD, and I took his class about 2 years ago. He gave an NLP public speaking class, and we started riffing during a breakout session. In the class, there was only 3 students. It was myself and 2 others. So when Josh separated us in groups, I got to play with the teacher. And we were sitting there and we were speaking, and we realized that this technology, specifically NLP, is used by everyone every day. We just don't know that we're using it. And if we learn what we're doing and how to do it right, our lives will get incrementally, significantly much, much better. So that's the short answer. And before we go any further, Beth, I'm going to tell you, my role is to dumb it down. I'm the guy who, that's what I do. And now I'm going to hand it over to Josh, and he'll give you the real explanation of why we wrote the book.
So I view the role more as like, because we can have a conversation between, you might say, the teacher and the student, we can really get into, how do you actually take this stuff on and make use of it and make it simple and practical? And then, so having the two of us really got to that point so much better than certainly than I could have done on my own. So I like to think of it this way. We wrote it to democratize NLP. There's incredibly powerful stuff here, and not enough people know about it. And even a lot of people who've heard the term, they don't really even know what NLP includes, and certainly they don't know how to apply it in their day-to-day life, in their relationships, in their work, and so forth. And we're looking at it. Greg summed it up for me in this one little phrase when we were talking in that conversation he was referencing. He said, "Hey, ever since I studied NLP, I had this idea, NLP for lawyers." It's like, because he's a lawyer, right? And it's just like they're not going to spend 15 days learning to be a practitioner and figuring out how they can apply it. But there's so much. They're professional communicators. It's like there's so much that's useful for them. If somebody would just do the work to make it simple for them to apply it in their day to day. And I just like instantly he said that phrase and it's like, oh my God, that is missing. That is important and that's missing. And then as we got into the project and then Greg talked me into writing a book, we started realizing this is not just for, a few professional groups. This is for everybody. This stuff, this people need to know about this stuff. It's not, and also it's not like wacky out there stuff. These are tools that come from psychotherapy, time tested for 50 years. And now at this point, there's a lot of research that has supported the various different tools and then we've drawn those connections in the book. These are not things we invented. They're things that can actually be used to help you make a change for yourself or someone else. Once you start learning about them, they tend to be pretty logical. They tend to make sense. But just a lot of people don't know about it. And so we did this to make it accessible.
That's great. I know that mindset is a big buzzword now, and understanding what mindset you have and kind of doing a deep dive on yourself. And so with you, there's a little prescriptive, which is helpful because you can kind of go through the list, which I did. I expect everybody else did. And it's like, yeah, that one, that one, that one.
Mm.
And so whether you start at the beginning and then kind of take it in the order that you wrote it, but as you said, go wherever you're at and deep dive there and then come back.
Start with your needs.
Right. And so can you talk a little bit, this is podcast is about thought echoes. And so I've been fascinated with the nature of thoughts in terms of how they echo through time. And you can say your past self, future self, but it's also how it affects other people. And so when you look at the belief system, to me, that very much the 8 beliefs that you had outlined, that very much to me spoke to these echoes that we have, my terminology, in terms of our upbringings and all the influences that we have over time. So can you talk a little bit, this isn't your, a long session, so we can't go deep dive into all of them, but can you speak to how you came up with those 8 beliefs and kind of maybe speak to what are the most prevalent, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah. So these 8 beliefs, um, they're a subset of what are called the presuppositions in NLP. They're things that we invite people to presuppose in every situation, every conversation to presuppose. And we selected these 8 because we think that as a group, they provide they cover most of the territory from the NLP beliefs, but they also, we really think they can make you limitless. There is nothing meaningfully. I mean, I'm not gonna go and ever be able to, be a professional athlete, but in terms of the psychological skills, make you limitless. So that's where they are. I just want to say one other thing, mindset. Um, this thought echoes idea, it's really interesting that you mentioned that the way we show up, there is research to show that the beliefs you arrive at a situation with are going to influence not just your own behavior, but then through your behavior, how other people are going to react to you. There is such a thing as a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? People who are rejection sensitive find ways to get rejected more, right? But there also are ways out of that. But so the beliefs really do matter. They affect quite a few things, and we give examples of that, and talk about how that is. But yeah, my favorite is the meaning of your communication is the response you get. Greg, what's your favorite?
My favorite that, we call the chapter All I Need Is Within Me Now, but it's we have the resources to take the next step towards any goal that we desire. And that's very empowering. What that means is if I want to be a singer, I can take the next step. If I want to be a ballerina, I can take the next step. I'm never going to be performing as a ballerina, probably, but I can certainly take the next step to become I don't know what a male ballerina is, I guess,
Ballerino?
ballerina, right?
Can you give in the chapters, each chapter, they've got obviously questions and there's a workbook kind of at the end to dig a little in terms of the resources that you've got a little deeper. And I love I talked about it being prescriptive, but that's my tendency is I love when I'm learning something new. I'm going to write over the book anyways, in terms of underlining it and making notes in the highlights in the corner. But to pause for, different questions will trigger different emotions or reactions. Some of them are it's like, yeah, but then it's like there's a juicy one. And I like the fact that you ask those questions in the chapters and then you've got the additional resources. When you use this book to teach people it, or this is after they've taken, like Greg had taken the course, so then this is kind of something that would come with the course.
Oh yeah. So there's different courses, but what we'll do is we'll take an exercise. We're often not in the course, like teaching all of the science and everything that you might see in the book. If as you're reading, and sounds like you've noticed this, that if you simply reflect on the questions as you're going, you are applying the tools that you're learning about in that chapter, and you're learning how to apply them again in the future. And if you need help applying them again, you can just flip to the end of the book and read those questions again. We also have them on our website on, nlpdifference.com. Actually, I have to tell people about this. Check out A Talk to the Book. Greg created this really cool AI tool. you could just go talk to the book and say, hey, what should I do in this context?
Is that
And
on your website? I missed that.
it's on our website. Yeah. Well, it may be that we put it up after you checked because
Okay,
it's
okay.
recent. So we'll do an exercise if let's say we have a group of lawyers or we have a group of managers, or we have a group of HR people, the specific context might be different, but we can help them take on the perspective of the person they need to communicate with the stuff that you'll see, for example, in chapter 19 on taking a second person perspective, and we can walk them through those specific steps that are right there, and then we can give that to them as a tool.
Mm.
Right. So we very much, these are things that are meant to be used and they're designed to be embedded right away. And we want people to be able to walk away and use it again. So we try to have tools like that.
In looking at the meat, it's a very meaty book. Feel like I need to, because I'm not done. I will admit that I'm not done. So in going through the sections, there's a part of me that just wants to like get the next gem, and then there's another part of me that said, no, this was a really juicy one. So why don't you just linger in this one for a moment and really try it on from different perspectives? And so having the three sections where it's a mindset for being a good communicator, and then to be able to understand anyone, to be able to kind of play in their shoes, so to speak, and then how you change people's mind. But I love the parenthetical that could be yours. Because I think so often when we're trying to take a position and change somebody's mind or see our side, we don't realize that we could put the mirror up to ourselves, and be open to other people trying to change our minds. And so I thought that was I appreciated that because it's not just about, wanting to change the world for the better where you have the view. So one of the questions in the goal setting was, or looking at your goal, was to ask the question about what you don't want. So you're coming at it instead of, some people will come at it in terms of what they want, and other people are like, well, I don't know exactly what I want, but I don't want these things. And so can you speak a little bit more about how you kind of did that positive negative to get people to hone in on what they're really trying to take their ballerina or singer or whatever their next step is going to be?
I think that, is it okay if I jump in, Josh?
Oh, yeah.
The main thing that we need to understand, we're always communicating. Always. Everything we do is a form of communication with ourselves or with others. And before we can communicate with others, we need to learn how to communicate with ourselves. So the way this book is written, and I'm trying to address last few questions that you brought up, it's written first that there's a question of mindset. And you've addressed it beautifully, Beth. And I think what's important in mindset is without a mindset, you can't get to where you need to go, because then it's just futile action without a goal. You need to have an outcome before you do anything. When you communicate with yourself or with somebody else, you need to have a clear outcome. And we talk about 5 questions in the book about how to form a well-formed outcome. And when you talk about outcomes, while what we don't want is relevant, the more important piece is what we want, because the way our brain works, we go towards what we think about. So there is a question of what we don't want, but that's not really when we plan the actual outcome. That's brought up when you ask a question, well, I want this. What about this I don't want? In other words, we're not planning what we don't want in the ultimate outcome. What we're asking is, how is this outcome going to give us something that we don't want? For example, one of the examples we use in the book is I'm 56 years old, but I've struggled with weight for my entire life. I've always wanted to lose weight. I knew I wanted to be a certain weight. But what I didn't want was to give up the lifestyle that I had, because I wanted to have fun. I wanted to go out eating, drinking with my friends, but I still wanted to be a certain weight. So I had to address what I don't want, not as the goal, but as a byproduct of the goal. If that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think if the goals or the outcomes are too big, then having questions to kind of refine it so that you've got something actionable that you can do towards that versus, I don't know, pick a big hairy goal and it's like, I'm never going to do that in a period of time. Well, it's like you got to chunk it up. And so part of addressing too what you want to keep you in that lane, there'll be things that come with it, which it sounds like, you like to have fun with friends, but sometimes that is in conflict with your goal to try to keep the weight down. So being aware of that so that you've got ideas for how you can mitigate that. So I do.
And if you don't become aware of that, there's going to be pushback on your goal. And quite often, you simply will drop the goal. Like you won't
Mhm.
actually get there. And because that internal pushback tends to be from that thing that you would lose if you did actually do what you're talking about doing, right? There's a reason. There's a reason for not doing the thing that you've been avoiding doing. How is it serving you to not do that thing? And that's what Greg is getting at when he was able to discover, what do I not want there? It's often a left out piece, but without it, you're quite often not going to make any progress on a goal.
Right, right. Or you don't, and it's like, why am I not doing it? And so this gives you a vocabulary and kind of a way to explore
Hmm.
what might have been getting in your way.
And
So
once you know, a lot of people can find solutions.
yeah. When you've been having these classes or interacting with people, and it sounds like you're doing it within some domain, so like lawyers or HR as opposed to a kind of a general audience. But when you get to the part about trying to understand where somebody else is, rather than kind of talking at them and being very logical, these are all the reasons you should be doing XYZ, but trying to be where they're at. Can you share how that's been received? I'm thinking specifically when you've got, and I don't have the phrase because I'm used to it's being called mirroring, that when somebody's really upset, especially as a parent, calm down, calm down. It's kind of like, that's not going to make, it's like, it's better to go, I know that's really bad. That's hard. It's frustrating. Give it a beat. And then there's this kind of, oh, you understand me. So intellectually it makes sense, but in practice and certainly in the work environment. So I'd be very curious how these different groups of people, um, when they came upon that, what kind of shift in their perspective in terms of where they're trying to meet people where they're at happened.
So, one thing I just got to experience this in a class a couple weeks ago, maybe it was even a week ago, where we were doing a part of it. So the phrase in NLP, pacing and leading, join them at their pace and then move on. Mirroring that term, a lot of people know it from the book Never Split the Difference. When you mirror back to somebody their words. And in NLP, we use that term mirroring or mirroring and matching for a much broader context, not just their words, but joining them emotionally, joining them. And not that you have to like have their feelings, but it's just like if somebody's really got some intense energy, like you can amp up your energy a bit, right? If somebody gestures a lot, you can gesture a little more. If somebody, what it does is it non-verbally communicates, I respect your reality. I get it, right? I care about it. And if you're just copying someone, no, then it communicates that you're making fun of them. But if you're just kind of like getting the gist of it and joining them and trying to kind of meet them there, it also helps you understand the reality a little better. But it's a thing to experience. There's certainly research to show that the more you get in sync, the more people experience rapport and they're open to listening to you. Building trust. It's just about getting someone to a point where they're like, okay, I'll give this person a shot. They basically get what I'm dealing with. I'll listen. That's really all it is. It's in the experience. So like we'll have people where we'll say, okay, let's try to get in sync, and they'll tend to start cognitively and they'll be like, oh, yeah, me too. I get it, right? Or I've had that experience. That gets you partway there.
Mhm.
But it's amazing that a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, it's the nonverbals that actually communicate it even more. It's just, we really do. If I'm breathing in sync with you and moving a little bit more and I'm talking more at your pace, or I'm using a little bit more of Greg's, you know, energy, right?
Jersey, yeah, Jersey energy.
Yeah, Greg has influenced me to do a lot of things. He is very good at this stuff. But and I love watching him do it. I know he's doing it sometimes. It still works, right? I have found that people will say, "Huh, that's weird." Like even when we were out of sync, or I was saying that's a bad idea, or you were telling me, "Yeah, this is not the time to talk," because of the nonverbal synchrony, I felt like I was still appreciated and that this would be a good relationship to continue, or that I had the freedom to ask the questions I needed to ask, right? That these are typical kinds of experiences people will talk about. And it's you join somebody where they are. You can do it in terms of the information, but you can also do it in terms of getting in sync non-verbally. And regardless, when you're getting in sync, that tends to be the experience. It opens doors for the conversation.
And I think I knew about it a little bit in corporate, and I was in high-tech broadcasting industry, so there were a lot of big personalities. Every big industry said they have big personalities, so we had some too. And there would be people who, engineers especially, that would just get really upset about whatever they were trying to work on. And I remember I used to have a trick where we'd go walking and just take, so I've got the senior engineer. So I'm in marketing. I mean, yes, I've got a computer science degree, but I wasn't coding. I was marketing and team building was kind of my thing. So I'm with some senior fellow, it's like, just tell me what what you're trying to work through. And they'd be really animated, and it's just like listening to them. And it's like, that sounds really bad. And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, is this like we got to stop production? And then invariably, just by that listening, it's like, no, 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 it's a 4. But it really bothers me that we're doing it. But it reminds me how just being in this little bubble with somebody trying to work through whatever they're trying to work through, that they knew I was listening. And so that was helpful. It's harder for me to do that with my husband, I will say, because there'll be something, especially in the political climate that we've got, and try to get past it. And so when I do kind of take a breath and go, I'm trying very hard not to be as upset about it as you are, but it's clearly very upsetting to you. So trying to mirror that in a respectful way, so that then we can have another, the rest of the conversation. So I've found that is more difficult in practice, but it does have a positive effect in terms of being able to then have a conversation. So, what surprises have you had in working with people now that you've worked with Greg to have it be more accessible, and the, kind of the terminology, and in writing the book and the examples that you use? Have there been some surprises in terms of how people have interacted with it?
Josh and I, we presented at a trial lawyer conference in Las Vegas a few months ago. And what we found was that a lot of people speak the lingo without understanding what the lingo means. For example, trial lawyers, or all lawyers, and most people who sales professionals, are taught to take on the POV, or point of view, of the person they're trying to influence. Most people say, okay, I'll take the point of view of the person, but no, how do you do that? Right? How do you do that? You can't, there's actual steps that you can take, understand that person's point of view. And those steps are in no little part based on the presuppositions. For example, there's a presupposition that says everybody has a good reason, good intent for what they're doing. Most people are not sociopaths. They're not evil. If they're doing something that's pissing us off, they're serving some kind of an internal need. And if we can find out what that need is, then we earn the right to influence. Because, Beth, we can't influence anyone unless we earn the right to influence them. So, and what that means is, when you talked about your husband, I'm assuming you guys have different political philosophies.
No, actually, we are on the same spectrum. He just internalizes and watches way more than I do, because I, for my mental health, am more, from my perspective, more balanced. And so it has to do more with, I see how stressed he is, and I don't want him to be so stressed. And I know he wouldn't be more stressed if he, would take a break, kind of thing. So it's not from a polarization perspective on different positions. It's more the intensity level on the same perspective.
And I want to talk about the polarization, because what happens is, whether if you put on Fox News or CNN, you're living in two different countries. Because you're hearing the reason I believe, and I think most NLPers believe, that there's such a dichotomy, such an ability to communicate, is people don't take the time to understand the other position. Because I can disagree while understanding what your position is. And if I can understand the world that you live in, if, for example, if I dealt with someone who is a hypochondriac, and my first reaction was to be annoyed. Like, this person is always complaining, they're this. But then when you dig a little deeper, when you look at their map of reality and you realize this is a lonely person, this person who feels powerless, and this is this person's way to assert some kind of control in his or her world. In other words, they feel significant because that makes them special. They are the center of their universe. Everybody gives them sympathy. Are you okay? So if you understand that that's what's driving that portion of their personality, and you give them significance somewhere else, you make them feel important about something different, maybe you can lead them out of the funk that they're in. I think that's the biggest takeaway I think people should take from the book is in order to influence another person or yourself, you really have to understand what's happening. Because if you're trying to motivate somebody with something that doesn't motivate them, it's not going to get them there. If you're trying to lose weight for the wrong reasons, you're never going to lose it. If you're trying to talk to your husband, you're trying to figure out what his view of the world is, and you get it wrong, and you start, if he's motivated by hugs and you tell him words, you can talk all you want. You're not going to change anything until you give him that hug.
What about you, Josh? What big surprises did you have?
I have found that when I come back to the book myself, I wasn't surprised that this would have the effects for other people. I've been teaching NLP for many years. I've seen what happens. What I was surprised at is that when I read the book, I just, because I have to go back, we had to go back and edit things periodically and whatever, right? Or somebody says, recommend a chapter for this, right? And so like I'll look through and I'll read again. And what I'll do is when the book asks me to think of a prompt, like think of a situation where you're like struggling to, get someone to do something, or think of a situation where you've been wanting to make this change and you haven't, or think whatever it is. I'll just call something to mind just because I'm reading through it, right? And every time I'm like, wow, that was really useful. So I keep having this, and I feel it's okay to say this because we didn't invent this stuff. We did not make these things up. We just worked hard to try to teach it and make it simple. But, so it's not like, oh, I created something and it's brilliant. We took something that other people have created and tried to make it accessible. So I've been having that experience, and that has been delightful. One other thing that has been very nice that was a surprise is that there are audiences we didn't have in mind who are running with it in directions that we didn't think of. I ended up doing my book launch at Zibby's bookshop, which is here in my neighborhood, but Zibby has a big social media following, and if you look at the other books that are typically the book launches there, they're getting into kind of, a lot, there's novels and there's emotional stuff and there's things that it's not typically a self-help book written by a trial lawyer, right? And by me, right? But it reached the audience, we were on the top of their, best-selling list for a little bit. And like there's something about like how do I connect with people? How do I control my own emotions, right? I think a lot of people want to use this for themselves. It's not just about how do I help others change.
Right, right. No, I think it's true. And I don't know if it is a combination of COVID. And so we all kind of, life changed almost overnight in terms of how you interact with yourself and other people, so that got people out of their habits, whether they liked it or not. And then you have the polarization that we have here in the US, because this is not just about the US, but it is not just unique to the US. And so I think these norms of life kind of goes on and there's ups and downs. There are these big waves that have been coming through us culturally right now. And so I think there's more of a appetite or hunger for how can I look at what I've been doing a little differently, because I really do want to make some changes. And I'm willing to say I need to change too. It's not just everybody else needs to change and I'm fine. And so having different approaches to taking things that, as you said, you can do a deep dive in it, but here let's make it a little bit more accessible to you. Is I think people are looking for that. They're hungry for that. So
We may
good
have
for you.
tapped into that desire. Yeah.
If you had, with the little bit of time that we've got left, can you give, if people want to start, other than get the book, but if you wanted to kind of have an invitation for how you would invite them into having this more easier to digest way into this, what would that be?
We wrote this book in one of three different ways. You can just sit there on the beach and read it in 2 afternoons, or you can sit there and spend 4 or 5 days and actually think about the exercises, or you can take a couple of weeks and actually dig in, which is probably the most productive, but the first two will also bring benefit.
Mm.
What we did, the most NLP books written before us are terrific, but they're written by clinicians for clinicians.
Mhm.
And they're, but for that reason, for somebody like myself, are very difficult to read. Because, once you start getting into the heavy science of the thing, you get lost. And why this book is going to be is such a great resource for everyday people, because we have the science to back it up, and we have real life simple examples of how to apply it in a variety of situations. I mean, I was only partially kidding that my job was to dumb it down. I mean, I was actually being a little bit honest. It's, the way Josh and I wrote the book, he would write a chapter, I would edit it, I would write a chapter, he would edit it. And he knows the subject matter way better than I do. But what I know is what's easy to digest. And I said, we gotta dumb it a little bit. This one we gotta dumb down a lot, because I'm a good test case. If I get it, anybody will get it. So we have to make sure that I got it. And I promise, Beth, this book is great for everyone.
I think that's great. And I know we're going to finish the interview quickly, but the AI tool, I am really curious about the AI tool. So to go back and have another way to interact with the material that you've got.
Go play with it. Yeah, play with it. If you like it, then let us know. It's a great way to get into it, just to test the waters.
Thank you guys for taking the time, and I'm really excited to go and try that AI tool to supplement what I'm doing with the book. So I may go back to where I was and then take a break after I've answered the questions and go see what the AI tool has to say. So thank you very much. I'll make sure all the contact information is down below in terms of access to you guys to the book, and obviously AI tool, because I'm talking about that so much and excited. So thank you for taking the time, and enjoy the Jersey Shore and the weather that we've had on the West Coast that's been more mellow. So thank you again for taking the time.
Looking forward to it coming out. Thanks for having us on.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
take care. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Thought Echoes podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend. It helps get the word out. Until next time, keep exploring the echoes that shape your world.